He wants you to beg, not because he hates you, not because he's cruel, but because begging would confirm something. He needs to believe that he still has power over your emotional state. And the moment you don't do it, something inside him destabilizes. When a man pulls away and goes quiet, many women assume it means disinterest. But in certain dynamics, silence isn't absence. It's a test, not a conscious one he planned out, an emotional one his nervous system initiates. Because distance gives him control, and control gives him safety. What he's watching for isn't your anger. It isn't your sadness. It isn't even your confrontation. He's watching to see if you'll collapse inward and chase. Because if you beg, explain, over text, or try to fix the silence, you unintentionally reassure him that no matter how he behaves, you'll remain emotionally available. And that reassurance kills urgency. Silence, when met with self-containment, instead of panic, does the opposite. Here's what most women never realize. When a man withdraws, and you respond with emotional pursuit, his nervous system relaxes. He feels anchored without having to show up. He gets closeness without responsibility. But when he withdraws and you don't chase, his nervous system loses its stabilizer. Your absence becomes loud, not because you punished him, but because you removed the emotional leverage he was unconsciously relying on. Men who pull away often expect one of three responses: pleading, explaining, emotional overgiving. All three signal the same thing. You need the connection more than he does. And once that belief settles in, attraction erodes, not out of malice, out of psychology, because desire doesn't grow toward what feels guaranteed. It grows toward what feels self-directed. When you stay silent without hostility, something unfamiliar happens in his inner world. The power dynamic shifts. Instead of him regulating the connection becomes uncertain. Instead of him feeling chosen, regardless of behavior, he feels the possibility of being replaced, not by another man, but by your peace. And peace is threatening to someone who only feels relevant when you're emotionally reactive. This is where panic begins. Not dramatic panic, not obvious desperation, but subtle cognitive unrest. He starts checking his phone more than he wants to admit. He replays the last interaction, searching for emotional cues. He wonders if he misjudged how much access he had to you. And here's the part that matters most. His panic has nothing to do with losing you as a person. At first, it's about losing control of the emotional narrative. When you don't beg, you don't give him proof that he still matters in the way he expects. That absence forces self-reflection, and self-reflection is uncomfortable for someone who avoids emotional accountability. Many men rely on a woman's emotional availability to soothe their own insecurity. They don't always know they're doing it, but they feel safest when someone else is reaching. Your silence interrupts that pattern, and interruption creates awareness. This is why silence feels so different from confrontation. Confrontation still centers him. Silence recenters you. When you don't ask, "Why are you doing this?" When you don't explain how much it hurts, when you don't seek reassurance, you stop feeding the dynamic. That allowed him to withdraw without consequence. And consequence doesn't mean punishment. It means emotional realism. He now has to sit with the weight of his choice. The choice to pull back. The choice to go quiet. The choice to assume you'd remain accessible regardless. Men learn emotionally, not verbally. You could explain your worth for hours and it wouldn't land. But the moment your energy pulls back calmly, the lesson arrives without language. This is where many women make a critical mistake. They confuse silence with strategy. This is not about winning him back. It's about removing yourself from emotional imbalance. Because begging doesn't bring closeness, it brings compliance. And compliance is not intimacy. When a man wants you to beg, what he really wants is relief from responsibility. Begging tells him he doesn't have to clarify, he doesn't have to commit, he doesn't have to change. Your silence removes that comfort. Now he must choose. Step forward, or sit with the discomfort of absence. And discomfort is where panic grows. Not panic that explodes outward. Panic that turns inward and asks, did I miscalculate? Is she actually okay without me? Why doesn't this feel like it usually does? The woman who stays silent, without resentment, becomes psychologically unforgettable because she doesn't react the way his nervous system predicted. She doesn't collapse. She doesn't protest. She doesn't bargain. She withdraws her emotional labor. And emotional labor is what was holding the connection together. Once that's gone, the illusion of control fades. This is why silence works, not as a tactic, but as alignment. You're no longer trying to secure his attention. You're protecting your internal equilibrium. And the moment you do that, the dynamic either transforms or reveals its limits. Both outcomes serve you, because a man who only stays when you beg was never offering stability. He was offering access in exchange for emotional submission. And the moment you stop submitting, the mask slips. Silence doesn't scare healthy men. It scares men who depended on your emotional pursuit to feel valuable. And when you stay silent, calm, and grounded, you don't become invisible. You become uncontrollable. That's where panic lives. When you stay silent, something unexpected happens inside him. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly. At first, he feels relief. Silence confirms his belief. That distance gives him control. No confrontation, no emotional demand, no responsibility. This is the phase most women never see, because they break silence too early. But if you don't, his relief doesn't last. It never does, because control without connection quickly turns into uncertainty, and uncertainty activates the mind. He starts replaying the last interaction, not to understand you, but to understand himself. Did he push too far? Did he misread your emotional threshold? Did he assume access that no longer exists? This is where silence becomes loud. Not because you're ignoring him, but because you're no longer stabilizing him. Many men rely on a woman's emotional presence to regulate their inner state. They feel grounded when someone is waiting, hoping, reaching. Your silence removes that anchor. And without it, his nervous system has to work on its own. That's uncomfortable. He starts checking his phone without admitting why. He opens messages, expecting your name, and feels a subtle drop when it's not there. Not panic yet, but awareness. Awareness that something shifted without his permission. That's when questions begin. Is she upset? Is she pulling away? Did I lose something I assumed was secure? And here's the key detail. He doesn't ask these questions because he suddenly realized your value. He asks them because his sense of predictability broke. Predictability is safety, and safety disappearing creates internal tension. This tension is what most women misinterpret. They think he's confused. He's not. He's recalibrating. He's adjusting to a version of you who is no longer emotionally chasing. And that forces a reckoning. Because now, if he wants connection, he has to initiate. He has to risk. He has to show up without being prompted. And for men who are used to emotional control, this feels exposing. That's why some men disappear longer. Not because they don't care, but because approaching without leverage feels unsafe to them. Your silence removes the emotional advantage, and instead of stepping forward, they freeze. This is where many women break. They reach out to clear the air, to be mature, to check in. But what they're really doing is restoring emotional safety for him. And the moment they do, his nervous system relaxes again. No growth, no insight, no shift. Silence only works when it's consistent, not cold, not bitter, just grounded. A woman who stays silent, without resentment, communicates something powerful. I'm okay without access. That message is destabilizing. To a man who relied on access to feel secure, he begins to feel the emotional cost of his behavior, not because you explained it, because he feels it. This is how emotional learning happens, not through conversations, through consequences. Consequences don't mean punishment. They mean your energy no longer compensates for his withdrawal. When that happens, he starts assigning meaning to your absence, and meaning creates gravity. He wonders if you're reevaluating him. He wonders if you're emotionally detaching. He wonders if he underestimated your strength. This is the moment where panic begins to form. Not dramatic panic, internal panic, the kind that shows up as restlessness, overthinking, sudden curiosity. He may scroll through old messages, revisit memories, mentally place himself back into moments where he felt important to you. Because importance is what he's afraid of losing, not love, not yet. Men don't fear losing love first. They fear losing relevance. And your silence questions his relevance. This is also where the dynamic clarifies for you. Because not all men respond the same way. A secure man will feel the shift and step forward with clarity. An avoidant man will feel the shift and oscillate. He may send a neutral message, a casual check-in, a breadcrumb, not to reconnect deeply, but to test access, to see if silence broke you. This is a critical moment, because how you respond determines everything. If you rush, over-explain, overgive, you restore the old dynamic. If you respond calmly, without emotional urgency, without reopening yourself fully, you maintain the shift. And he feels it, because now, even when he reaches out, he doesn't regain control. He feels the boundary, without it being spoken. That's when panic deepens, because boundaries without words can't be negotiated. They can only be respected or walked away from. And here's the truth most women need to hear. If a man panics, when you stop begging, he was never responding to your love. He was responding to your availability. Silence exposes the difference. And once exposed, the connection can't return to what it was. It either matures or it ends. Both are clarity. Both protect you. Because a relationship that only functions when you chase was never balanced. Your silence didn't break anything. It revealed it. This is where the story splits. Because silence doesn't produce one outcome. It produces truth. Some men come back changed. Others disappear completely. And the difference has nothing to do with how much they liked you. It has everything to do with why they were connected to you in the first place. When a man returns after your silence, he's not returning because he missed conversation. He's returning because the emotional structure shifted. He felt the absence and realized he no longer had access. Without effort, that realization creates pressure. Pressure to act, pressure to clarify, pressure to risk rejection. For emotionally mature men, this pressure leads to growth. They reflect, they regulate, they step forward with intention, not dramatic words, clear behavior, consistency, initiation, presence. They don't come back testing. They come back grounded. Because silence didn't threaten them. It informed them. But for emotionally avoidant men, silence feels different. It doesn't invite growth. It triggers defense. Because they weren't attached to you as a partner. They were attached to the emotional position they held in your life. The moment that position disappears, they feel exposed, and exposure feels dangerous. So instead of leaning in, they retreat further, not because you didn't matter, but because closeness, without control, feels unsafe to them. This is why some men vanish. The moment you stop chasing, not slowly, abruptly, because the connection required your emotional pursuit to exist. Once that's gone, there's nothing holding it together. And that's not loss. That's clarity. Many women mistake disappearance as proof they weren't enough. But the opposite is true. Your silence simply removed the emotional scaffolding that allowed him to stay half present. You stopped carrying the weight. And when you stop carrying, anything unbalanced collapses. This is also where ego gets involved. Some men don't return with sincerity. They return with curiosity. They send a message that feels casual, detached, almost indifferent. Not because they don't care, but because they're testing whether your silence was real. They want to know if you've truly shifted or if you're waiting. This is where emotional discipline matters. Because the moment you over-respond, over-explain, or emotionally open the door wide, he learns that silence was temporary, that you still return to the same position, and the cycle resets. But when you respond calmly, briefly, without emotional hunger, something clicks. He realizes you're not trying to win him, you're evaluating him. That role reversal is deeply unsettling for someone used to control, because now he's not the chooser, he's the one being assessed. This is where panic either transforms into respect or turns into withdrawal. Men who can tolerate emotional equality step forward here. Men who can't fade out. Again, both outcomes protect you. Because attraction that only exists when you minimize yourself is not attraction, it's dependence. And dependence collapses under silence. Another subtle shift happens here. You stop romanticizing his behavior. Because distance gives you perspective, you begin noticing what you tolerated, what you excused, what you overfunctioned for. And this awareness changes your energy permanently. Even if he returns, you don't receive him the same way. You're warmer with boundaries, open without urgency, present without attachment. That difference is felt immediately. He senses that you're no longer emotionally positioned beneath him, and that's when things stabilize or end cleanly. There's no chaos here, no confrontation, no closure talk, just alignment. This is why silence is powerful, not because it makes him panic, but because it gives you clarity. Before he does, you no longer ask, "Why isn't he talking to me?" You ask, "Does this connection feel safe, mutual, and grounded?" That question changes everything. Because once you stop waiting, you start choosing. And when a woman starts choosing, men feel it instantly. Some rise, some disappear. Neither is a failure. One is confirmation, the other is release. And both move you forward. Silence isn't power, because it controls him. Silence is power, because it returns you to yourself. By the time you reach this point, something important has already changed. You are no longer waiting. Not emotionally, not mentally, not energetically. The outcome no longer defines you. And that's the shift that alters everything. When you stop filling the space he created with anxiety, the space stops belonging to him. It belongs to you. You use it to breathe, to reflect, to notice. And what you notice matters. You notice how much effort you were giving, how often you were explaining, how much emotional labor you were carrying alone. Silence doesn't just expose him, it exposes the imbalance. And once you see imbalance clearly, you can't unsee it. That's why silence feels frightening at first. It removes distraction. But once the fear passes, clarity settles in. You stop asking what he's thinking. You start asking how you feel in the connection. That's emotional authority. And emotional authority is deeply attractive because it isn't seeking approval. It's anchored. Men sense this before you say anything. They feel it in your tone, your pacing, your availability. You're no longer leaning forward. You're standing still. And standing still changes the direction of pursuit. At this stage, if he returns to a different woman. Not colder, not harder, just self-contained. Your warmth is no longer automatic. Your presence is no longer guaranteed. It's intentional, and intention creates meaning. If he meets you there, something real can form. If he doesn't, nothing is lost, because you didn't abandon yourself to keep him. That's the real win. Silence also teaches you something essential. You don't need to announce boundaries for them to exist. You don't need to explain shifts for them to be felt. Your consistency does the work. And consistency is what creates trust. Not words, not promises, energy over time. This is why emotional restraint is not suppression. It's maturity. You still feel. You just don't leak. You allow emotions to move through you instead of directing you. That regulation is what makes you unforgettable because people remember how you made them feel. And calm presence creates a deeper imprint than emotional chaos ever could. At this point, panic no longer matters. Whether he panicked, whether he returned, whether he disappeared, the center of gravity has moved. It's you now. You don't need him to choose. You've already chosen yourself. And that choice changes the kind of relationships you allow going forward. You stop attracting half-present men. You stop tolerating emotional ambiguity. You stop shrinking to stay connected. And the men who remain feel the difference. They show up clearer. They communicate directly. They don't rely on silence to manage intimacy because silence only works on those who fear closeness. And you're no longer available to fear. You're available to truth, to presence, to mutual effort. That's what silence gave you, not leverage, alignment. And alignment doesn't chase, it stands. If this spoke to something in you, pause for a moment and comment the word grounded, not to signal understanding, but to anchor it. Because the moment you stop chasing silence, silence loses its power over you. And that's when everything changes.